and your local SuperTalk Mississippi radio station. But don't forget to, you can watch us if you'd like. We are on your computer or your mobile device. Just head on over to SuperTalk TV. Now, if you enjoy watching live sporting events, then you're going to be in for a treat today. Joining us today is Don DeMarsico. Did I get it right?
You're close. It's John DeMarsico.
DeMarsico. I knew. You know what? We're going to use John from here on out. He has been the New York Mets game director at SNY since 2020, and he has worked with the broadcast itself for the last 15 years. He's also a film junkie, a physical media collector. He's a dad, but he calls Mississippi home, which I think is pretty cool. So welcome, John.
Thank you so much for having me.
So how does one happen into this? I mean, and I told you before we got started here on Good Things, not much of a baseball buff. They joke at me around here that I'm like, go team, like when it comes to sporting events in general. But what I can appreciate or do appreciate is trying to tell a visual or a verbal, like we do here, sort of story out of something you really don't have control over, which is a live event. I think that's super cool. So how did you find yourself as the New York Mets game director?
I think we probably need to start at my childhood because
yes, take us all the way back.
I did grow up a diehard New York Mets fan.
How lucky.
For better or worse. My dad is from Long Island, so he instilled this Mets fandom into me, even though I grew up out of state in North Carolina. So I attended North Carolina State University, where I also played baseball, and toward the end of my tenure there, I decided to look for an internship up in New York, hopefully working for the Mets or some Mets-adjacent role, and I found SNY, SportsNet New York, the home of the New York Mets television broadcasts. So I applied for the internship, headed up to New York for an interview, got the internship, and spent what amounted to was basically my life savings at that point to move up to New York for the summer in 2009.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just banked it all on that.
I banked it all on that. I slept on somebody's couch for an entire summer. I worked 35 games at Citi Field, the home of the New York Mets, and was basically getting coffees and hot dogs. But something special happened there. I walked in and I saw. I kind of had a light bulb moment. I saw the director sitting in the chair, and it's this guy named Bill Webb. Now, you may not know the name, but you certainly know his work if you've watched baseball. He is the quote-unquote greatest baseball director who's ever lived. He did the World Series for Fox for 20-plus seasons, all-star games. The biggest games if you've watched baseball over the last 3 decades, you know Bill Webb. And I saw him work, and it instantly triggered something in me. Because I have sort of a production background. I studied film in college. And what I saw was basically live editing as the director. And so it was something that I was familiar with, and it sort of introduced me. It showed me, this thing that I've been watching my entire life, baseball. You never comprehend like that there's human beings behind every single one of those cuts.
Yeah.
And every decision being made is by a human. Every single transition, graphic being put in, every sound that you hear is a human being doing that. And so it really it opened up my eyes during that internship. And I spent the entire summer in New York in 2009 and was offered a job in 2010. And I've been at the network since in some capacity until I was promoted to the lead director back in 2019. The 2019 and then 2020 was my first season.
They say air traffic control is probably the most stressful job on the planet, but now that I'm listening to you, John, I would add in live sporting directorship, because now that you can appreciate it as the viewer, there's so much. If you're there live and you're in the stands and sort of seeing it, you're really still only catching like one thing. When you're directing it from your press spots or wherever it is, you're trying to let the person at home see everything that you're seeing that's important and trying to figure out where to cut, where not to, and all the things. How stressful is game day?
It could be very stressful. At home, we have over 20 cameras shooting the action. And baseball is a different sport to cover than other sports. Most sports, if you think about it, if you're watching football, if you're watching basketball or hockey, it goes left to right on your television screen. Mm-hmm. In baseball, it's not the case. You're cutting from a center field camera for the pitch, and when the ball's put in play,
where it goes.
when the ball's put in play, you cut to a high home camera. So, and then all of the runs are scored away from the ball, which is unusual in sports, where usually you're following a basket or an end zone or a net. Baseball, it's just kind of chaos. And so there's 1,000 decisions that I make every single game, trying to convey the information to the viewers at home who aren't in the ballpark.
Do most professional baseball leagues, do they have this kind of streaming service? Is this unique to the Mets, or do they all have their sort of own way of doing things?
Every single sporting event that you watch on television will have a similar setup, whether it's football, basketball, college, NFL, it doesn't matter. There's going to be a production crew there producing the event, and there's going to be a technical crew there, cameras, audio, video technicians. There's going to be there's a crew of dozens of people every single sporting event that you consume at home. There are literally dozens of human beings behind it.
And then there's one director.
There's one director. There is.
And you go in and you just think, like, do you have, because I'm thinking like the coach for, the game coming up, they have a lineup for batting, they have an idea for plays or whatever it may be. I know it's a little bit different for the different sports. But do you go in with any kind of idea of what's going to go down? Like, do you get a little bit of inside information, at least about like batting lineup or any of that?
That's a good question. There's obviously the batting order, but I have found through my experience that I more or less like to enter the game with sort of a blank slate and just rely on my instincts to react. So I mentioned that I played baseball. So you have to sort of speak baseball first in this job, know the ins and outs of the game, and then the technical stuff comes later, timing-wise. So I like to just, to put it into an athlete's point of view, see the ball, hit the ball. That's sort of your approach as a hitter. If I get a fastball, I react to it, and that's kind of how I am in the director's seat too. What are they going to do what am I going to do with the ball if they hit it to me? I kind of have to think a little bit ahead like that. But once the ball is put in play, it's all instincts and reaction.
Does SNY, John, go on the road with the Mets? Like, are y'all taking like a portable, I guess it's different when you're at home within your Stone Stadium, but are y'all also streaming and directing when you're away? Absolutely, yeah. We're on the road with the team for their entire schedule. So it's 81 home games and 81 road games, and we're on the team plane. We're in the team hotel. We're traveling with the team, even though our group of production guys and our announcers are sort of isolated. That's more of our team. We are with the team most of the time. Is there like a Mets personality to every broadcast, or does the different stadium and game and then audience create a new personality for every event? That's interesting. So there's personality is the right word. Yeah, but. No, that's a good question. So a lot of these regional sports networks, which is what SNY is, it's a regional sports network in the Northeast. Each baseball team has one. Baseball is a unique sport where it's not like the NFL that's going to be on a national network once a week. Baseball is played every day, and so these regional networks most of them are very much homer broadcasts, meaning that. If it's they're a little more rah for the home team. SNY and our broadcast is not necessarily that way for the Mets. We've gotten sort of a reputation of calling it down the middle. Obviously, it's good for us when the Mets win, but if the Mets are throwing it around out there, our announcers will certainly give it to them fairly. Just as much as they would the away team. Are the announcers in the booth with you guys, or are y'all in separate departments? So the announcers are in the TV booth, which is directly behind home plate, so that they can see the whole field. We are. For the most part, the kind of we are in. So first of all, we're in a television truck. It's a mobile TV studio that travels everywhere. It's not like a fixed structure. It's literally a truck that travels the country, follows us where we go, and then once it parks, it kind of unfolds like a transformer and becomes a TV studio. And so most of the time, that truck is parked in the loading docks of every ballpark. Usually right next to the dumpsters. So I like to tell anybody, if they need to find me, just follow the smell of garbage. That's where you can find me. Well, that and probably Sue stressing out. Okay, now my mind went straight to like Ocean's 12 of 11 where they pop out and they're like looking through all the bank things and you see all the sort of TV cameras and all that. Is that kind of what it looks like inside of your inside of your
Yeah, you'd have to kind of imagine walking into almost like an 18-wheeler, and you get inside. It's like, oh, it's bigger on the inside. It's kind of like Doctor Who. And then you walk in. It's very dark. It's very cold to keep all the equipment from overheating. And then there's a massive monitor wall with probably 60 monitors. Each one can be split into like a quad 4. So do the math, 60 times 4. It could be overwhelming, but if you kind of organize it the way that you want, it becomes more palatable with experience.
We'll stick with this. We got more with John coming up next. Just head on over to SuperTalk TV. And if you're a Mets fan like our fan over on the C Spire Texas is a text land, then you're enjoying the show, but it doesn't take a Mets fan to appreciate the directorship that goes behind live sporting events. And we've got John DeMarsico. Tried it so hard.
You'll get
DeMarsico.
it eventually.
I'm going to get it eventually.
There you go.
But that's okay. You have been with the New York Mets since 2020 with the SNY network, and you have been upgraded to director over the last year. Is this your full season? No, I was
promoted. 2020 was my first season as the lead director. I've been at the network since 2009.
Right, for the last 15 years. We're going to get it all right at the end of the day, which is an interesting year to be promoted, right? Because 2020, that was the year that the world just lost its marbles.
Absolutely.
And one of the best things about sporting events, whether you really know the game or not, is just the fact that the energy there from the fans and the spectators and all of that, which I'm assuming as a director you guys use as part of your broadcast to make the game, feel like you're there, like you're from your home to there. So what was it like walking into COVID?
Oh, it was daunting to say the least, for a lot of reasons. So my daughter was born March 20th, 2020.
Wow.
And so it actually, if you're going to get a global pandemic, it actually worked out okay for me because that season, the Major League Baseball didn't start until July. So I got to have like all of these extra months at home that I wouldn't normally have to be like new dad.
Silver lining.
And so, but eventually that Major League Baseball decided to have a 60-game season down from 162. And it was my first season as the lead director. I'd obviously directed prior, but on a fill-in basis. And so I would honestly say half of the show is, it's capturing the event, which includes the fans and the atmosphere at the ballpark. What would a college football game be without the band and a packed house and all of that? So same goes for baseball. It was daunting, but it was also a good way for my first season to be kind of just a nuts and bolts. Like let's get our feet wet and see what we can do here. But it was a whole nother monster because Major League Baseball that season, we couldn't obviously travel. And so when the Mets had road games, we were still back in New York at our mobile unit. And so we relied on a feed from the home broadcast to be fed to us,
Nothing can go wrong.
Which our announcers had to call off of a monitor, which leads to all kinds of chaos. And so in a way, to do such a chaotic season during my first season was actually a good experience because everything after that was a little bit easier. Once you do that kind of chaos.
And nobody else had walked through that either. Like I'm sure it's because every team has a film director or some kind or a director. So nobody had done this before. So it's not like, you were walking in. Everybody's walking in blind.
Absolutely. And you kind of had to work together, because when we were doing the home broadcasts for the Mets, we would send our feed to whoever the opponent was. Say we were playing the Braves, they would get our feed of the game from our cameras, and their announcers would be calling the game from Atlanta. And so you had to kind of work together. And so it was a good way to get to know all the other directors in the league and form sort of a foundational relationship because you do still have to kind of work together even today because we do share cameras.
So, John, we're talking about the Mets, which is obviously not in Mississippi. Although we are getting a new baseball team of some kind, and we're going to be, what's our name, Rhino? What's the new name for it?
Mud Monsters.
Mud Monsters, right.
Oh, I like that.
Because the Mississippi Braves left us. But anyway, of all the places, you call Mississippi home. So how did you find home here in Mississippi, even though your passion and your work and all of that is many miles away, states away.
Well, I met a girl from Mississippi, obviously.
Of course! That is the perfect way to start this story.
So I had obviously been in New York since 2010. Travel all over the country. My wife is a lobbyist, so she also travels all over the country. At the time, she was living in D.C. I met her during a road trip to play the Washington Nationals, and
I feel a Hallmark movie coming on.
blah blah.
Did you
blah.
wear plaid?
Fell in love. Blah 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 blah. Got married, and shortly thereafter, and we lived in New York.
Does that make sense?
We lived in New York, and it wasn't the best for her. For her job, it was kind of difficult for her to be in New York at the time. And so we thought about, maybe starting a family, and where else would you want to go other than home? And so we came back home for her to live in good old Jackson, Mississippi. She grew up in Brandon, Rankin County, but we ended up back in Jackson. And her mom is still down here, and like I said, in 2020 we had our daughter Cora, who is amazing and loves going to school at St. Andrews, and having her grandmother nearby. It's been really nice.
So what was it like going from the hustle and bustle of the city, John, to obviously it's a little bit slower pace here in Mississippi, but we still love our baseball?
Absolutely. No, I grew up in North Carolina, so it felt almost like I was coming home too. Like even though my wife says I didn't grow up in the South, she doesn't consider North Carolina the South. I do. So, they have accents there too. So it was a little bit of a return home for me. And at the same time, I wasn't like quitting New York cold turkey, because I still live half the year kind of following the Mets and the hustle bustle. So I'm in the city for, 3 months a year, because we're on the other 3 months during baseball season we are on the road. So I do still get my taste of New York.
Oh, and well, at least you get the winters here in Mississippi, or do you have to be in New York?
Correct. No, yeah. So it actually works out perfect.
And you get New York summers.
New York summers and Mississippi winters.
You really have this figured out.
Don't tell anybody.
Sort of in that way. But I also love that you just sort of make it work, right? And that Mississippi can be a home where you can sort of refuge from, but then also still encourage what you do, because I think it's so neat for other people to hear about that these type of job opportunities or career paths are out there. You started in film. So what led you even into the interest of the film industry?
I've always been a movie nut. I mean, as a kid, I used to wear out VHS tapes like Ghostbusters, Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
That was just like my thing. I was an obsession. And then in high school, when the DVD era came along, I would buy everything I could get my hands on. Every Christmas, it would just be stacks and stacks of DVDs. And when I got to North Carolina State, I found out after a year or so that they did have a film program. And once I took my first class, I just totally fell in love. And it was something that it came sort of natural to me, because it's always been a hobby, and the thought of making it maybe a profession one day was really exciting. I didn't necessarily obviously fall into that, but I'm sort of in a film production adjacent job, and I've gotten a little notice over the last couple of years for actually implementing a few film techniques into an actual baseball broadcast.
So for those of us who don't know what those would it be like still shots? What would that be?
It's sort of just the foundational, like, bedrock of film knowledge that I try to make every cut cinematic. I try to make every single shot as compelling as it can be, storytelling-wise, without losing track of the game, obviously. But there's a lot of split screens. There's a lot of overt movie references that I've done over the years. In 2022, probably the most popular moment was the Mets have this closer named Edwin Diaz, who comes in from the bullpen to a song that you played earlier in the show. It's Narco by Timmy Trumpet. It's like this. To me, it always reminded me of like a matador entering the arena. And so we decided to blow off a commercial break one time in a big game against the Braves.
Did you ask for permission for that?
Well, you ask for you ask for permission after the fact, So we blew off the commercial. We covered this live, and it went viral, and it became sort of a phenomenon. Even to this day, even during the election, someone posted a clip of of Edwin Diaz coming in from the bullpen and said MSNBC's whoever does the Electoral College on their video board entering the arena or something, and it had like millions and millions of views again, like
hey,
2 years later.
Yeah.
The song became like #1 on Billboard, and Timmy Trumpet, the artist, came to Citi Field that year and performed live as he's entering from the bullpen. It was just a phenomenon that snowballed and went out of control. But that's sort of a good example of a different way of thinking when it comes to producing a sports telecast.
Which also makes it entertaining for the viewer, whether your team is doing well or not. People still want to be entertained. And so we're continuing our entertainment with John. He is the New York Mets game director with SNY. We've got more with him coming up next. FM, also streaming from that SuperTalk Mississippi app and your local SuperTalk Mississippi radio station. If you'd like to watch us, you can do that. We are on your computer, your mobile device. Just head on over to SuperTalk TV. We're continuing our conversation with John DeMarsico.
Nice.
Yes!
Nailed it.
Home run. I knew I'd finally make it. Oh, good. He's been the New York Mets game director at SNY since 2020, and he's been sharing just about your work. And so many people on the text line are saying what a cool and interesting interview and job, which I appreciate, which I thought it would be, because I think so many listening to good things watch live sporting events, whether it's football, baseball, or basketball, or you name it, and we don't take appreciation for what's happening sort of behind the scenes. But you mentioned earlier, John, that it's the game and everything around it. So usually it's the everything around it that has like lukewarm fans like myself who's being forced to watch something because of their spouse that really gets our attention. So how do you as the director keep your focus on the main thing, which is the game, but then also recognize there's all of these small moments of wonderful opportunity happening in the stands?
Yeah, so there's a kind of a motto in the business where if you're doing your job right, in my job as a director or anything in TV production, is no one really notices you're there. You know, people at home kind of just let the images roll over them, and they're watching the ball game. You know, they don't like to think about, you know, every cut and every, you know, element that goes into it. So if we're doing our job right, you know, it's sort of invisible, the broadcast. I don't necessarily buy into that philosophy. I kind of think that the game should be more entertainment. You know, every night at 7 o'clock, Met fans, they'll tune into SNY when they could be watching anything. They could be streaming Netflix or being on TikTok, whatever it might be, and they're choosing to be with us at 7 o'clock. And so I take that very seriously to provide a form of entertainment. And a lot of that entertainment comes with not just the game, everything around the game, like you said. The fans in the seats are a big part of it. This past season, the Mets started off really, really poorly last year. In May, they were 11 games under 500, and they ended up making a run all the way to the postseason. They were the best team in baseball in the second half. A lot of Met fans obviously gave credit to the team, but there were also these honorary mascots that kind of rose up out of Met fans in the ballpark that we showed on the broadcast, and they became sort of memes and sort of these rallying cries. One of them being the McDonald's mascot, the Grimace. Yes. So the Grimace threw out the first pitch for some reason before a game this season, and the Mets went on a hot streak and won 10 games in a row. And so people started dressing up as Grimace coming.
Is that around the milkshake time? Didn't Grimace get his own milkshake or something like that?
Yeah, he got a milkshake, but everyone was wearing purple and it was in these big, inflatable Grimace outfits. And I would show them after a big Met hit or something, and so that became a rally cry. And then there was this guy that wore a fur coat to games and had long curly hair that I would show, and he became a rallying cry. And then there was this kind of Chihuahua-like dog that came to the games dressed in full Mets gear that became a rally. So there's all of these things around the game that, and I'm way too plugged into Mets Twitter and everything going on in Mets land and all the pop culture stuff. So I participate, and then people can reach me easily too over social media. And so they're I'm in seat whatever before the game, and so I'll write it down. And whenever I need to deploy that, rally cry, I know where they're sitting. So it's part of the fun for me, but it's also giving the viewers at home a sense of place. They're sitting on their couch at home. There's more than just 9 guys on the field. There's 40,000 people in the stands. Mm-hmm. a lot of the more interesting stuff that I shoot happens off the field.
I was scrolling your X, Twitter, whatever you call it, earlier, and the shots, and it always gets me too, but I'm sentimental that way, of like family members witnessing their son for the first time either getting a hit or a home run or like all of that, because for a lot of those players, I mean, they've dreamt about the moment to get to, go to that sort of next level, and there's always a first or there's always a last, right?
Yeah.
And so getting those shots of knowing, because you don't know if they're going to get a home run, how you just hanging out there waiting on mom and dad to break out and cry.
That's one of my favorite things to do too. So anytime anyone makes a major league debut, I always try to find out where the family's sitting, because as the game becomes more mechanized with challenges and all of these new rules, a pitch clock, you don't ever want to lose track of the humanity in the game. These are human beings playing the game, human beings umpiring the game, and it's a bunch of humans in the stands. And as a director, I always kind of lean more towards the human element than even the baseball element. I'll sacrifice a play on the field just to isolate a family member or a fan that is, nervous and praying in their seat, just to capture that reaction, because I feel like not only does it heighten the drama, it makes it kind of puts the person at home into a position where they're able to relate, and it becomes more than a game.
You mentioned, John, you were very humble, saying that you've gotten some accolades. You've won awards, and you've gotten, like, the New York Times was written article about you recently. I wasn't able to read it because I don't subscribe. I was so mad. I was like, clicked on it, and it would show me. Because you do have kind of like what I'm learning, like a different sort of take, or trying to innovate, right? You're not trying to be just in a box. Does that light a fire under you, or does that put more pressure on you? Because, I mean, every game, you're only I don't know if you're only as good as your last broadcast. Let's not say that. But you have so many, it's a revolving door. There's so many games in a season. Does that put pressure on you, or is it light a fire under you, or?
Honestly, it hasn't added more pressure. It's actually been nice knowing that the things that I'm trying on a nightly basis, people are actually enjoying. The following on social media has been like almost 100% positive when I, do something sort of out of the box. So, which is very strange for social media, because that's kind of a cesspool of, bad takes and a lot of confrontation. So that hasn't been the case for me. And so the fans seem to really get behind it. The people making decisions at the network have gotten behind it. And I have a lot of support. It's like you said, baseball is a funny game. The worst part about it is that they play every single day, but that's also the best part about it, because no matter what you do one game, you play tomorrow. It's not the NFL. You're not going to – every cut is not life or death. It's baseball. People are sitting on their couch, or more often than not these days watching on their devices, and they're there to be entertained. They're there to kind of escape the real life issues of the world and just kind of watch a ball game. And so if I have a little fun here or there, and that means they probably are too. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Does it help that you're a diehard fan for the Mets? Would you have taken this job for another team? It's
funny. So one of the first things that Bill Webb taught me, the guy that was the greatest baseball director of all time, was leave your fandom at the door.
How do you do
leave
that?
It at the door. But with that being said, the first job that I had in the production truck was as the graphics producer. So all of the on-air stats and all of the little fun tidbits that would get inserted in the game. And so having that foundational Met knowledge and fandom was super helpful starting out. And so because I had the Mets history down, and I was a numbers guy, and all of that came very easy. And so it kind of helped me kind of progress. And now that I'm in the position that I am, I'm able to leave the fandom at the door. If the Mets mess up, I'm going to take the shot of the manager or the guy that messed up. I don't have any sort of restrictions at all. I can shoot what I want. And I think Met fans, maybe more so than most baseball fans, I think they enjoy the pain a little bit. They sort of embrace it. The Mets haven't won a World Series since 1986. So part of being a Met fan is feeling that pain. And I like to kind of participate in that.
So I just learned recently, John, that every baseball player has a walk-up song. I didn't realize that. Have you ever gone to one and been like, hey, man, You might want to change that.
Well, since I covered the Edwin Diaz walk-in to Narco, I've paid a lot more attention to what the walk-up songs are. Some guys have some good ones. Some guys have some really bad ones. Your producer played the Temptations on coming in here from commercial break, and that is Francisco Lindor's one of the Mets' best players. His walk-up song, and so that became stuff like that. When a star player has a good season like that and his song is super catchy and the fans start singing it in the stands, it becomes part of something that I try to capture too. Mm-hmm. When he comes to the plate in a big spot, I make sure the cameras shoot people singing too, so that I can cut between the guy coming to the plate, people singing, boost the sound, the audio in the ballpark so that we can hear the song, and it becomes sort of an event, and it becomes another sort of rally cry over the course of an 162-game season, something that people can get behind.
I didn't realize the pressure of a walkout song.
I know.
Man,
I know.
The things that you don't think about when you're just a fan in the stands enjoying a broadcast. Well, stick with us because we got a little bit more of our broadcast here on Good Things coming up. TV, which you can find us on your computer or your mobile device. We're wrapping up our conversation with John DeMarsico.
Yes!
Oh, I did it twice! Doubleheader here on Good Things. And anywho, if you're just joining us, he is the game director for the New York Mets. He's been that since 2020 with SNY. And he chooses Mississippi to be home, to be with his family. But he's also a film junkie and a physical media collector. And I love that because that means you've got quirky things. And so anytime you get a collector. So how did this, obviously you've had the love of film. That's how you even got into this idea of doing TV directing. But when did you start collecting things?
Well, I mentioned earlier that sort of the DVD era of the early 2000s, late 90s sort of triggered my love of film because I had everything at my fingertips before there was ever streaming or Netflix or any of this kind of stuff that we have today. And so you had these movies that you loved, you could kind of have ownership over them by physically buying the DVDs. Obviously, the days of DVDs being a big seller have gone out the window. Best Buy doesn't even carry them anymore. But there are all of these boutique labels that sort of have come back. I think since COVID, it's become more of a thing where they're putting out these sort of special editions of all the films that we love. And so I like to support those kind of companies because not only do they release Blu-rays and 4Ks discs of these movies, they're also involved in the restoration and preservation of film, which I find very important. In a time when everything is at our fingertips on streaming, everything's not. There are so many things out there that not only aren't on streaming devices, but aren't in the best quality on streaming devices. And the best way to get that to best quality is to own the discs. If you want to see the best version of something, even if it's a big time movie, whatever it might be. Mission Impossible or whatever, and you want to stream it, it's going to look great on your TV, but it's going to look better on disc, and it's going to sound better on disc. And if you have a home entertainment system with surround sound or Dolby Atmos, you're not going to get that full effect without having the disc.
What's your most prized? Either DVD or VHS, or maybe that's two different questions.
Wow. Well, today I actually just got in. As I was leaving for the radio station, I got in my 4K copy of Pulp Fiction, which is a very big movie for me, sort of ignited my passion for film back in the day. Well, I found it a little later at 12, 13, okay. So it's still probably a little too early.
I think we all remember that, the first time you saw the car ride.
So that's a big one. So I'm excited to tear into that when I get home. But I have probably over 3,000 movies at home.
Wow. Are they all do you have them organized in some capacity?
They're mostly alphabetical, but there are a few labels and film companies that get their own little section that aren't part of the general population, as I like to call it.
So did you cry when Blockbuster went out of business?
I have a lot of nostalgia for Blockbuster and the days of going in and picking out a movie, but I've sort of recreated that at my house.
Yes.
By having all of these shelves filled with movies, and if I want to go check out a movie, I can go in with no, I don't know what I want, but I can look and I can read the back of the box, and then I can physically take it off the shelf and bring it to my TV, and this kind of makes it more special than flicking on your TV and going on your clicker and just finding something to stream and clicking on a thumbnail. It makes it more of an event for me, and I enjoy that.
Well, if game directing doesn't work out for you, John, you could always reopen Blockbuster and call it something, call it something else. But if that hadn't happened, I know you sort of fell into it. And a few things I took out of your story. Number one, for any young whippersnappers out there listening, take the internship, bet on your dream.
Yes.
You just never know where that
Absolutely.
will go. Do you think, would it have been still in film, or was there like another profession that you might would have seen John ending up in?
I don't know where I would have been. My plan was my only plan was film, because I was so passionate about it. And if I hadn't had that internship and had that light bulb moment, who knows where I'd be? Maybe a lot more people would know my name. I don't know, but
they wouldn't be able to say it. They may know
it. Exactly. At the end of the day, I love what I do. I look forward to going to the ballpark every night. And at 7:00, when the lights come on and that red light comes on, I am in my happy place.
So I know that your love of Mets came from your family. You grew up as a Mets fan with your dad. Has there been a special moment since you sort of stepped into this game director role over the last, 4+ years now, been with it for 15, that you've gotten to share with your dad?
Share with my dad. Well, my dad doesn't miss a pitch, so I share literally every pitch with my dad still. And he's watching nonstop. He gets frustrated when he has to watch one of the other team's feeds. I think when they play the Braves, he has to watch the Braves announcers, which he hates. Sorry, guys. But every single big moment that I have, I definitely shared with him. It's pretty cool.
How can we share the social medias with you real quick, John?
You can find me on Twitter or X at John DeMarsico. I'm also on Blue Sky now at John DeMarsico. I got an Instagram account too, but if you can find me on X, that's my main social media.
All righty, I appreciate your time, and I'm a new Mets fan.
All right,
I don't know whether my husband will be happy or not, but here we go.
I'm sorry.
All right, stick with us. You got more up next. You got the boys with Sports Talk from 3 to 6. Rhino and I will meet you back here tomorrow at 2, but until then, I hope you all find time for the good things.